All right, all right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Second Rainbow Coalition book reading. My name is Lobo. I'm a captain of the Oregon Brown Berets. We have a few chapters. I'm here in the Hillsborough area, south of Portland. Welcome. We're going to be doing a book reading on Brother Kwame Shakur's book, My Search for Answers, Truth, and Meaning. Before we get started, I'll read over the Second Rainbow Coalition Statement of Unity. And then after we get done with the statement, I'll read off a few pages of chapter 2. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to take over, then we'll go ahead and do that. And then after we read the chapter, we usually like to reflect on certain things in the chapter that kind of hit home to us and so forth. And then different things that it could relate to in terms of things that are currently happening through intersectionality. Of course, we're all suckers for capitalism, so there's something that might hit home to you when we read it and so forth, right? And so with that being said, thank you so much for joining. And I will read off the Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. What I'll do, Nick, is I'll share my screen so I can read it, and then I'll give you back host properties, if that's okay. Or if you have the statement, you could bring it up and then I'll read it. However you want to do it.
Yeah, I can bring it up.
Okay, cool. Let's do that.
Is that good? Can you see it?
Let's see here. I see everybody's beautiful faces. That's all I see.
Let's see here.
There we go. There we go. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, perfect. All right. So the Statement of Unity starts off with a preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to quote-unquote reservations or concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the Inca sunk its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico, grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military intervention and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As Dr. Huey P. Newton stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. And between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. So very true. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. Thank you, Nick. The legacy of the first Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, the original Young Lords, and the Young Patriots organization. A number of other movements joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, Guardian Rebellion, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against the capitalist, imperialistic system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the first Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, goddammit. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, we were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition, therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest.
Oh, hold up. Sorry, I'm kind of being.
Oh, no problem.
There we go.
Awesome. As the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire repressive force of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the United Front that will best serve our class liberation by upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, and all other Rainbow Coalition members. We establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all our organizations and our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. Man, ain't that the truth? It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and the united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win, all power to the people, boots on the ground. And then, of course, it names off various members of the current coalition, the New African Black Panther Party, various other Black Panther parties, the White Panther Party, the Green Party of New Jersey, the Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, which my beret faction belongs to, Fury, Feminist Uprising to Resist Inequality and Exploitation, NASO, which is a North Alabama School for Organizers, and the New Era Young Lords. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys again for being here. That's our statement of unity, kind of like some ground rules. What I'll do is I'll start off reading chapter 2 of Brother Kwame's book, My Search for Answers, Truth, and Meaning. And then I'll stop every now and then. And if anybody wants to continue reading in the audience, just raise your hand. If you guys have a question, you can either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and then either I or Brother Nick from the Poor People's Army will call out to you. And we thank you guys for being here. And with that being said, if you want to bring up chapter 2, Nick, we'll get it going with me starting off to read.
Yeah, give me just one sec here.
No problem.
Is that good, or do you need me to zoom?
Oh, I'm an OG, Nick. If I could get you to zoom, please. My old man eyes. There we go.
There you go.
That's perfect, actually. That is perfect. All right, now let me move our guest panels on the right so I can see everybody. Awesome. All right, so chapter 2, the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. As I sat on the prison bus to the penitentiary facility I was being shipped off to, I stared out of the window, thinking about what had awaited me. Despite spending time in juvenile institutions before and doing 10 months in the Marion County Jail awaiting my trial and sentencing, nothing really prepares a person for spending decades in maximum security prison facilities, especially when you're 20 years old, as I was. Man, at my sentencing hearing, Judge Tanya Walton Pratt, a Black judge, had given me 39 years for the 13 counts I had been charged and convicted of. For me, that was like giving me life. I say that because I was only 20 years old and was being told that I would have to do those 20 years all over again, except this time behind bars and locked gates. My concept of time was limited to those years I had already spent on the earth. Nothing felt more suffocating and overwhelming than to conceive of starting my life all over again under modern day slavery. And that's what it was, modern day slavery. Years later, I would learn how true that was, even under the color of the United States Constitution. According to the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, slavery was actually legal if you had been convicted of a crime. It was right here, right there for all to see. Quote unquote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. My ancestors have been slaves for nearly 400 years in this country and have fought to free themselves from one of the most horrific conditions that human civilization had documented in its annals. Yet here I sat, manacled and shackled from my wrists to ankles, headed back to the contemporary version of the same. For a Black man, prison was a tangible outcome for a troubled life which seemed to be lost in aimlessness, anger, and a disdain for life. I never wanted to be a statistic myself, but I realized that the life I had come to accept for myself held forth a possibility that as a future reality, if ever apprehended. There were many nights I had sat up in the county jail wishing the police had killed me during that shootout. The fact that I had survived and was now headed to prison had become my worst nightmare. However, this one I couldn't wake from. Uh, it's crazy how much movies had informed my initial conceptions about doing time. I remember as I stared out the window as we made our way to the final destination, thinking about the 1995 movie Dead Presidents. Lorenzo Tate had been one of my favorite actors since he played O-Dog in Menace to Society. One of the movie characters that made up a lot of my own alter ego traits as I became more involved in the streets. In Dead Presidents, though, the part that came to mind was when he was on the way to prison himself in the Grey Goose, quote unquote, or parentheses, prison bus. The look on his face as he glared out the window was one of acceptance, that he would have to face a predicament that he could never reverse and change now. The life he had lived had brought him to this unfortunate crossroad of uncertainty and reflection. Man, that's deep, 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 deep. As we neared the prison, the guard tower and razor fence came into view. It seemed to stretch for acres and acres. I had wanted to be transported to the maximum security prison near Indianapolis, Pendleton Correctional Facility. However, at the penal intake facility called the Reception and Diagnostic Center, or RDC for short, which all prisoners had to pass through in order to evaluate us and give us our DLC number, mine was 967420. They had decided that I would be shipped to the prison in Carlisle, Indiana, about an hour and a half from Indianapolis, southwest from my home city. We passed through several electronically controlled gates that closed behind us. When the bus stopped, we all got off and entered the receiving room and ordered into a big holding cell. I knew a few of the guys who were doing their first bit too. C. Murder and I hit it off from the time we had left the RDC and was on our way to WVCF. He was from Naptown as well. That's what everybody called our hometown, even if you weren't from Nap. He was down for shooting a policewoman or something, he told me. A lot of us were either 18, 19, or in our early 20s. I had just turned 20 myself, a prior month to being sentenced. After eating the lunch stacks they had given us and receiving our prison issued clothes, our prison ID badges, several correctional officers led us through another gate that entered the actual facility. There were only a few prisoners out when we entered the yard. The few that were outside stared at us as we made our way up the walk. For someone who hasn't been deprived of sunlight, nature, and something as trivial as a blade of grass for 11 months, they wouldn't understand my next reaction. Interesting. And I'm going to stop right there. If anybody would like to continue reading, just raise your hand and either I or Brother Nick will call you out. And if not, then I'm going to go ahead and continue myself. And I'm looking. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue then. Man, I hadn't seen any grass in like forever, I said as I picked up a blade of grass, smelled it, and held it in my hand. Shit, I was thinking the same damn thing, another guy chimed in. I did almost 2 years in the county jail fighting my case. It's crazy how people take for granted little shit like this. I watched him as he picked up a blade of grass himself and viewed it with a level of appreciation that few people outside of prison would ever understand. It seemed as if I had initiated a collective epiphany moment because we all started talking about the grass, trees, and nature itself. You would have thought we were Buddhists or some shit because it was like we all had become one with nature and existence. Of all the new arrivals, I was the only one who wasn't assigned a cell house. After dropping off all the other guys, the correctional officer, which we normally referred as CO for short, informed me that I would be taken to DSEC until a cell opened up. I actually was fine with that. I was still pretty apprehensive about what prison life would hold for me. Doing close to 20 years in prison was something I wondered if I would ever be able to wrap my head around. Besides, besides, if it was anything like Marion County Jail, I knew it could become pretty violent at times. I had gotten into a number of fights myself, even jumped twice, one time by a father and son. Luckily for me, one of the first Crips I ever came across during the time I spent in the county jail had given me a little aid and assistance by pulling the son out of the fight. A lot of the guys in jail already knew who I was because my case was plastered all over the news in the beginning. Let's just say that bank robbery isn't one of those types of cases which dudes look down upon at all. In fact, it gave me more quote unquote status in the eyes of a lot of street cats. So I'm I'm not surprised that my Crip buddy jumped in and saved me. Let me move my screen here. Okay. And saved me. I wouldn't say I had necessarily won the fight because even though I ended up on top of him and controlled most of the wrestling match, we were both pretty exhausted and ready to call it quits. This happened in the medical block we were in. I had probably only had been walking on my own for about a month when this happened. He was no better off. He had been placed there for being eaten up by the police dogs during his arrest, something which was very common if you ran from the police armed or unarmed, a threat or no threat. If he hadn't told you the story, you would have figured he'd been shot by a high-powered rifle because he had the biggest gaping hole in his leg. Neither one of us were in any shape to be going to throwing blows. That's the only fight I've been in my life where we both had had enough at the exact same time and gave each other a knowing look as if to say, "You're over whatever this was about, then I am too." "Open cell 507, the CO yelled and pointed. When the cell door opened, I stepped in and sat all my property down. "Close cell 507. When the night came, I laid in bed and said a prayer to myself. I asked God to give me the strength to endure the predicament that laid ahead of me. I knew it wouldn't be easy by far, but I just wanted to get through this uncertain chapter in my life whole. I didn't want to leave prison broken and unable to get my life back on track. I didn't want to ever be stabbed or be in a situation where I would have to kill someone and would never see the light of day again. I wanted my girlfriend to hold on and see this through with me to the very end. And I wanted my mom and my family to be right there after this was all over as well, still alive. But most important, I wanted to be able to walk out of prison knowing that I did my time and didn't allow it to do me. I wanted to leave with my human dignity intact and a better person that I had entered as. As uncertain as I was certain that God would see me through his trial and tribulation in my life. A few hours after breakfast, they told me over the intercom that I would be moving to F cell house. F cell house was one of the working cell houses that guys would be sent to if they were eligible to work, meaning they hadn't caught serious write-ups that would preclude them from holding a prison job. D cell was the only other one you could be sent to work or attend school as well. On the other hand, E and G cell houses were the idle units you would have to spend at least 90 to 180 days on if you caught class A or B write-ups. This was a way the prison created a social caste system within the prison general population in order to allocate benefits and opportunities to those who demonstrated compliance with their rules and regulations. It was a modern day version of separating their quote unquote house slaves from their quote unquote field niggas while giving preference to those units that maintained house slave conduct. Wow. You would be surprised how many guys would go out of their way to stay on those units and would even talk about E and G cell houses as if they were actually better off than them. Over the let me move my screen. Over the years, I developed a different way of seeing. Over the years, I developed a different way of seeing the prison caste social model. I would grow to see the worst cell houses as the units I prefer to be on, anyways. Not only would they be more likely to take less shit out of the pigs, but they were always more guys on the pigs' radar. So it made it easier for you to fly under the radar and catch less write-ups on those units. It was counterintuitive, but I didn't want to be a good house nigga or a role model prisoner for massa. Shit, I realized that kind of stuff got you more problems across the board with both prison staff and prisoners. I figured being a field nigga wasn't going to take shit out of other prisoners, especially the prison staff would be more in line in how I would do my time. I couldn't identify with Uncle Tom when Nat Turner was the only humane option under oppressive conditions that degenerated and dehumanized your humanity at every opportunity. It can demonstrate that to you. When we walked into F Cell House, there were a few prisoners out. HB was the first one I had met. He was one of the barbers on the unit that cut everyone's hair if you wanted him to. They had cut my hair at RDC, which I wasn't digging at all, but that was protocol for all the new takes. I had been rocking braids on the streets and in the county jail. Now my wig needed some real attention, so I asked HB if he could line me up. I was anxious to get my first real contact visit with my girlfriend as soon as she was added to my visitation list. Open 309, the CO said as he pointed at my new address. After it opened, he walked away. After it opened, he walked away and headed back out of the cell house's side door. There was a CO on the floor who was in charge of the whole unit. There was a number of other prison staff in the control pod that overlooked both sides of the cell house. F left side and F right side, which was separated by a wall and could be only accessed by going through another side door, which conjoined them. You could also go through an electronically controlled middle door to access the left side or right side of the cell house. However, even if you went through the main hallway door, one of the correctional officers in the pod would have to open the right side of the cell house and let you in on the left side. I would say that each side held close to 100 prisoners, all double bunked in every cell. Therefore, as a whole, F cell house held about 200 prisoners total. I was being housed on the left side. Walking into the cell, I unloaded all my property from the blue cart I was given to wheel my property to the unit with. My cellmate was out to work, so I was yet to find out who I would be sharing a cell with. After I finished unpacking, I caught back up with HB, who was still cutting his brother's hair. So what's your name, youngsters? HB asked. Day Day, that's the nickname I started going by in the county jail, since it was short for my first name and had a cool ring to it. Where you from? Nap. You? I asked. Gary. The more we talked, I learned that he knew my cousin Sam, aka Junebug. Junebug was on my father's side and had done some years at Pendleton Correctional Facility back in the 80s. So had HB. I'm not sure what he had went to the joint on that particular bit, but it was either for drugs or prostitution because he had been a pimp. I didn't know this side of my cousin's history until recently. He had already changed his life around by the time I started fucking mine up. I just knew Junebug as the cousin I would occasionally share a family reunion with I went to anytime I went to juvenile. He was one of the head people there. My dad would try to get him to talk to me about the choices I was making, but I really wasn't trying to hear anything anybody was talking about back then. I remember Graveyard had killed his son, who was locked up around the same time he was there, HB recalled. My father had told me about that incident before. I never met Junebug's son. I don't think so. So I really don't know how to feel about it. However, I figured I'd probably bump into Graveyard eventually since I had a lot of time to. And I actually did a few years later. We actually became cool on a lockup unit we ended up on together. I never did tell him that I was aware of him killing my cousin. To this day, I still don't know what had transpired for Graveyard to kill him. I just knew that Graveyard had stabbed up or killed a number of guys in prison. This is how he got his nickname. I found out through HB that he had just been recently sent to the Supermax lockdown unit for stabbing up some guys a few weeks before I got there. Whatever beef he had with my cousin, I didn't have any plans on shouldering it when our paths crossed. HB and I talked a while before I headed back into my cell for count time. I learned that he had already been down for a few decades. The time the judge had given me, he had done that and more. He had already gotten used to people receiving 50, 60, or even life in prison from the time I had served in the county jail. But now to come across people who had actually done 20 or even 30 years in prison seemed crazy to me. I realized that if I didn't get into the law library and start learning the law myself, it was a great possibility I would end up doing my whole bit too. After I got my haircut, I went back to my cell for count time. Count time was done 3 to 5 times a day in order to keep track of everybody and make sure no one had escaped. The whole time I was there, nobody had successfully escaped from Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. I heard of a guy one time escaping by getting someone to forge papers downtown for him to be released, but never an all-out breakout. The whole time I was down, though, I swore to myself, if I ever get the chance to, I would go for it. Fuck doing that whole 20 years in prison. Right before lunchtime, I heard a lot of commotion coming from the day room area. Walking towards my cell was a light-skinned brother with long braids that some guys referred to as White Boy. He was from NAP too. Our meet and greet was short since all the guys who had jobs would come back for lunch to head back out for work. After lunch, it was back into the cell for the rest of those who didn't have jobs. For some reason, I thought that once I got in actual prison, I would be able to move about more freely, but it turned out to be the exact opposite. If you weren't in school or had a job, you would literally be in your cell for 20 or 21 hours a day. That shit used to drive me crazy. Every chance I would get, I tried to get out and stay out. Whenever I would get back from a pass, if the floor CO wasn't an asshole, I would stay in the day room and kick it with somebody just to stay sane. I never fraternized with the correctional officers just to stay out, as I saw other prisoners do. I'd come to view them from the county jail as our modern day overseers, not our friends, and definitely not there for rehabilitative purposes. One of the most anticipated times of the day was between dinner and recreation, mail time. Anytime the CO was passing out mail, he stopped at your cell and called out your last name through the side of your cell door with mail in their hand. Your day would instantly grow a lot brighter. I don't care if you've been down for a month, a year, 20 years. There's nothing like receiving mail from those on the outside who you've kept in your thoughts, and they've taken their time out to show it through their letters. Some mail you received was more anticipated than others. At the top of the list for a lot of guys, it was their girlfriend, wife, children, mom, or another immediate family member. For me, it was Peaches. I literally used to read some of her letters over and over again in the same day or week as I awaited her next one. I normally wrote her 2 letters for each one she wrote me, but sometimes I would write her a few more if she missed a week or two. One of the letters I read of hers every year until the year I was released from prison was the one she wrote me in the county jail. It was one of the first ones she ever wrote, dated May 11th, 1998. 1 month anniversary. And she wrote, okay, before I continue, does anybody want to take over? If not, I'm more than happy to do that. And I'm going to look to see if anybody's got their hands raised.
I can read for a minute.
All right, go for it.
Dayon, baby, how are you? Well, I'm okay because I just got off the phone with you. Baby, today is our 1 month anniversary, 5/11/1998. I miss you so much. I don't know what to do anymore. This situation is tearing me up, not to mention apart. Baby, miss you so much. I would do or give up anything just to see you. You're my heart. We've had disagreements before. We'll get over it and be just fine because we're about it, baby. We are always, no matter what we have to go through to get there, going to make it, and always, no matter what, going to be together. Promise. Sweetheart, I just can't write and tell you enough that I love you and would do anything in this world or the next for you. I'm looking at our picture right now, and I swear some thoughts of what I would love to do to you are surrounding my head and could scream, not to mention what I know I could make you do with your sexy, 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 pretty, luscious, desirable body self. I'm looking at your senior picture of you against the lockers without your shirt. It makes me think of when 4/26/98, I was licking your stomach and chest and kissing you and sucking your ears. I really wish I could do all of that and more right now. I just don't know how, you just don't know how bad I want you in my arms and how bad I want to take control of your body. You really just can't imagine. Let me just tell you, you're a little bit of what I would love to do to you, okay? Ready or not, it's coming. First, I want to caress your body in my arms. Then, I, of course, would have to get a hold of those ears that I love so much. Then the lips down to your neck, all around the back of your neck, and then kiss down your back until I got to your waist, then around to the front of your stomach and lick around your belly button and up to your chest and down each arm and again. Then I would have to get the lips again, then the ears, and at the same time be unbuttoning your pants and gently pulling them off, then caressing your legs from top to bottom and bottom to top. Then I would have to get the boxers off while licking your waist and stomach once again. Then I would have to get on top of you, telling you just how much I love you and you mean to me, before passionately making long, sweet love to you in some of the best ways possible ever thought of. I'm sorry if you didn't want to hear that, but it's how I feel and thought you should know. There's nothing I want to ever be held back or kept as a secret between us, okay? When I think of Sunday, 4/26/98 in the meadows over DJs around 5 or 6 p.m. when we were giving ourselves to one another and how good it actually felt. I can remember what your back and arms felt like as I was caressing them and holding on them. I can picture the faces you were making and remember asking you why you were, and you said because it feels so good. Also, when I was crying and you kept saying, I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise I'll never leave you. Don't cry. How I tried to stop, but I was so happy, but scared at the same time that I just cried harder and harder and held on tighter and tighter, telling you over and over not to ever go, that I needed you so much and wouldn't know what to do without you. Remember? I would give anything in this world to relive another moment similar to that one, but this time I wouldn't let you go so that I would know I would always have you. Baby, I hope this pulls over, and whether it does or not, remember when you asked me to move in with you when you got your place, supposed to have been this summer. Well, I want to. I'm ready to spend all my time with you and you only. I don't remember if you get out in 1 month or in a long time from now. I want to, okay? I hope you're really okay in there. I worry about you all the time, but I got to your my baby. I really hope you don't let no one come between us. I need and want you. You know I love you so much. I want to marry you. I swear I do. Do you? This summer isn't going to be right without you. Dayon, if you love me so much, why couldn't you say that if it was me instead of you, that you would still be with me like I'm with you? And why do you always seem so quick to let me go? If you love me, shouldn't you be trying to hold on? I mean, because you're the one incarcerated and might be for a long time. And a lot of the time you seem so quick to give up on me and let me walk right out of your life. And I don't understand, because I'm staying by your side. I'm still with you and will always be as long as you let me be. And I'm trying to work with you so that we don't ever separate. But sometimes you make me think that's what you want in the same sentence of you saying you love me. So make up your mind and let me know. So I give whatever it is that you want, me or not, to you. If it's me, act like it. I'm here and I'm going nowhere. If it's not me that you want, let me know. It might kill me, but I'll walk away and leave you alone for good without turning around. Dion, please don't ever say that's what you want if you don't know, because I love you too much to let you go. I always want you in my life. You're my heart, and I have a poem just for you, my boo. I love you with all my heart and soul. Love, Peaches. If that letter hadn't been emotional enough, the poem she wrote me had really melted me. You Make the World Go Round is the title of the poem. Do you know what you do when you open your shining eyes? The birds start to sing and the sun begins to rise. Do you know what you do when you come walking my way? My lonely long nights turn into wonderful happy days. If you didn't exist, I'd have no reason to live because I wouldn't have you. Therefore, I'd have no love to give. You are the one that makes the sky blue. When I see the stars at night, they always remind me of you. If you have not realized, then I will let you go. You're a diamond in the sky that makes the moon glow. Your smile does it all, so don't ever frown. It's you and the things you do that makes the world go round. She would write me poems like that all the time. That was just my favorite. You would think that someone facing the amount of years in prison as I would hold on tight to someone like her. But as her letter mentioned, I often tried many times to push her away. It wasn't because I didn't love her and wanted to spend my life with her. It was the complete opposite. I loved her so much that it hurt me to know that I might eventually lose her to time. Besides, I cared about her so much that I wanted her to live life and not put it on hold for me. We were both young, and I realized what prison life most likely would have in store for me. If I served my time and met all obstacles head on, whenever they came my way, that would only mean more heartache and distress for her to brag. Where was it? For her to drag her along through all of that. So I would wrestle back and forth over the longer I was in there. I was thankful that she stuck it out with me throughout the years in the county jail, but that was something that increasingly plagued me as I received letters and visits from her. I loved Peaches so much that at times I felt it would be selfish to have her to do this time when I knew it would be a long and emotionally draining road for me, let alone for her. I don't think anyone doing time gets quite used to it as if it was a normal way to live one's life. You just come to terms with it and accept the fact that you will have to adapt your mind, body, and soul to your current predicament. So you don't become your conditions in time, meaning you don't grow into becoming institutionalized and incorrigibly lost forever as the system has designed you to become. As often as I could, I would start going to the law library in order to become knowledgeable in the law and find issues upon which I could give back some of my time that was given to me. In the beginning, studying case laws was like teaching myself Arabic or Swahili or something. I didn't know where to start or how to even approach it. So I just started out, as the Chinese proverbs suggest, one to do when embarking on a road never traveled before. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I started reading cases first around aggravating and mitigating circumstances, since the judge used those circumstances to run my sentence consecutively, meaning they stacked 5 of my convictions on top of one another. So I would have to serve those sentences out one after the next. I figured if I could get them ran concurrently, then that would mean that I would only have to serve time for one sentence of 15 years instead of 3 years for count 1, 3 years for count 2, 3 years for count 3, 15 years for count 4, 15 years for count 5. The other counts will run concurrently with count 5. So that's how I received only 39 years compared to being given over 100 years on all 13 counts. I noticed that every case I read in regards to aggravating and mitigating circumstances were all governed by Indiana Code 35-38-1-7.1. That epiphany took my legal research to another level. Once I discovered a legal issue, I would then go to the West Annotated Indiana Code, the blue legal books, to start my research on any issue. That simple change in legal strategic research enhanced my ability to cover a lot more legal issues during the hour or hour and a half we were permitted to use the law library. As time went on, I began noticing that each case could be shepherdized as well. To shepherdize a case meant that you could see if the case you were waiting to use in an appeal was still good in whole or in part. Some cases you would discover had been decided against in higher court proceedings. For instance, if the Indiana Supreme Court had decided against a case and that case had used a particular case law to argue for relief, the Indiana Supreme Court can make it where that case was no longer the interpretation of the court. It could either modify the interpretation of that case, or it could make that particular case law no longer a relevant legal interpretation that could be used to argue with. Therefore, that particular case law was no longer the law. Before I would write a public defender or a paid lawyer requesting them to use a particular case law, I always checked to see if that case was still active in law. After months of research, I wrote to my public defender, Kathleen M. Sweeney, and asked her to raise 2 issues: whether I had been properly convicted of 3 counts of resisting law enforcement when all 3 counts arose from my actions while I was fleeing police after a bank robbery, whether the court properly found me guilty of 3 counts of criminal recklessness as a lesser including offense of attempted murder. If I was correct, cases such as Touchstone versus State 618 Northeast 2D 4849, Indiana Court something 1993, reasoned that a person can only be convicted of a single act of resisting arrest, no matter if there is only 1 arresting officer or 100 arresting officers at the scene of a crime. Therefore, cases such as Humes versus State 426 NE 2D at 383, Indiana 1981, stated that the offense of recklessness is not a lesser included offense of the crime of attempted murder, and further, there can be no crime of attempted recklessness. Although the first issue wouldn't have changed the length of my sentence, since those 3 counts ran concurrently with count 5, I knew if the court ruled in my favor for those first 3 counts for criminal recklessness, they would be forced to reduce my sentence from 39 years to 30 years. It took me a while to accept that as the best I could hope to achieve via appeal. But the more I studied the law, the more that became obvious, and I grew to accept that I would have to do 15 years in prison regardless. I didn't want to be like some of the guys I would come across in prison who knew they were guilty, yet was always thinking they were going to miraculously be freed somehow. I thought that was crazy as hell. It was as if they were setting themselves up just to be let down every year. I wanted to know how much time I realistically had to do according to the law, so I could wrap my head around that and just do it. There's an axiom I came across that I religiously embraced and said, if the law was in your favor, beat on the law. If the facts were in your favor, beat on the facts. If neither was in your favor, beat on the table. In my case, I knew I could only beat the law to get 9 years knocked off my sentence. I recognized that early in my bit, which prepared me more mentally, psychologically, and socially to face what I stood before me. I would have to do at least 15 years in prison because the law explained it very clearly to me as I educated myself about Indiana law. There was no changing that fact, and I had come to accept it. Whenever I wasn't in the law library and studying my case, I was waiting for recreation each day so I could work on my body and stay in shape. One of the ways I did that, besides doing my calisthenics, was playing pickleball out at rec. I met Buddy during the first few weeks in prison. He and I were both housed on the left side of F house. So we would come out for about 3 hours a day with each other. Like myself, he had recently been sent off to start his prison bit. We were around the same age and had many of the same interests. I was heavily invested in my faith in Jesus, or in Christ at the time. So he and I would attend all the Christian count letters together at the prison chapel. On the days that we weren't attending the prison church services, you could find him and I on the pickleball courts out at rec. In time, he would introduce me to Toma, and we became the three amigos, always attending church, working out, and playing pickleball together. Occasionally, I would hit up the basketball court and play some ball too, since I had joined one of the prison basketball squads. We weren't too bad either, but East Cell House had the best basketball team throughout the prison. I didn't think we would ever beat them. They really had an all-star team. I really enjoyed playing pickleball a lot, though. Around this time, Serena Williams and Venus Williams were dominating the whole professional tennis circuit. They had become inspirational to all of us on so many levels. Not only were they two sisters from Compton, but they were the two best Black women in the entire world. I love watching both of them on TV. I rarely missed any of their matches, but of the two, Serena was my favorite. It didn't take much to develop an infatuation with her. She had the coldest body I'd ever seen in my life. Some guys thought she was too muscular, but most of us thought she was a goddess in a tennis skirt. I'd always loved thick Black women, and she was definitely perfection for me. So to watch her tennis matches was a thrill to watch. The fact that she always destroyed all her competition made her seem untouchable and even more attractive. I don't think I ever spoke about her around Peaches, but I had two girlfriends, Peaches and Serena. Neither one knew it. That summer, I was really proud of Serena when she beat Martina Hingis to win her first U.S. Open championship in 1999. I think I can speak for a lot of the brothers who had watched her win that match. We all felt as we had won something as well. America had made us vicariously see ourselves in any of our people anytime they had accomplished anything of social or cultural significance. It was like we were all trying to overcome the legacy of systemic racism that had given us an inferiority complex that we were trying to collectively shake. Seeing any of us overcome an historical glass ceiling was a breakthrough for all of us. For some of us, we didn't think it would be possible until we saw someone who looked like us make it. Once that occurred, it was as if we all knew this was a step closer to proving our own abilities, accomplishing our own dreams, and being as successful as any white person could be. Serena was the one person who, not too far in age as myself, that I closely followed every accomplishment she would make while I did my prison bit. She may never know this, but I truly was and still am her biggest fan. Around August 1999, I got a visit from my mom and Peaches that would forever change my relationship with Peaches. She and my mom would come to see me every opportunity they could get. My other siblings, father and grandmother, were also faithful visitors. Since I was only permitted visits by the same person every 14 days, my mom would come visit me one weekend and my father would come the following one. In that way, I would receive visits nearly every weekend. I was fortunate in that regard because there were guys who never received visits from anyone. I can't imagine doing time without seeing my family, friends, or significant other occasionally at least. They played a big part in keeping me grounded, focused, and holding on to my sanity. I developed an even greater appreciation for them as years turned into years and grew into decades. Nevertheless, this particular visit, I remember walking in and taking a few pictures and then giving them both a hug. I tried my best to hold in what Peaches had written to me in the last letter she had written me. I could tell that she was searching my face for any signs that I had received her letter prior to the visit. But I held my poker face strong, firm, and unsuspecting. After a while of small talk with my mom and shifting my eyes back and forth between the two of them, she came right and asked me with concern in her voice, "Did you receive my letter yet?" "No," I said, knowing I was lying. I know she didn't expect me to say that because she asked me again in disbelief. "So you didn't get my letter?" "No," I said. "What was in it?" "Never mind. You should get it soon, I guess." "No, what you put in it?" I prodded. My mom realized something was going on because the whole atmosphere had changed. She looked at the two of us, shifting her eyes back and forth, and asked, "What's going on?" Tell her what you put in the letter," I said, glaring at her. "So you did get my letter then?" she said rhetorically. "Yeah, I got it. What's going on? Is there something y'all want to tell me?" my mom asked. "Go ahead and tell her, Peaches," I said angrily. She sat there pouting, partly mad at me for lying to her and putting on Front Street like that, partly because she was too embarrassed to say it. At that point, I didn't care how she felt. I was hurt, mad, the reality I was being forced to face. My worst fears had come true. Part of me believed she had done this to get back at me for breaking up with her a month before. I wasn't sure, but that's what I had suspected. I had only done so because I wanted to let her live her life. Besides, the separation was eating me up the longer I was in there, knowing times would just get harder and harder for the two of us. I loved her more than anyone I'd ever loved in my life at this point. Yet the realization of what she wrote in the letter made me grow more and more mad and develop a deepening contempt for her. It was impossible for me to feel sorry for her, for us. I felt embarrassed, but I was angry and hurt more than anything. If she wasn't going to tell my mom what she had written to me a few days before, I would, and I would do so in the most callous way and tone. Turning to my mom, I said, "She's pregnant." I guess hearing those words pour from my mouth hit me instantly like a ton of bricks. The realization of my dream wife being pregnant by another man while I was in prison felt like my whole world had collapsed upon me. I couldn't do anything but cry. I knew I would have to let her go for sure now, I reasoned, but I didn't really want to. Oh, that's the end of chapter 2.
So thank you, comrade. Appreciate you. Man, what a way to end chapter 2, man. I think my heart down, bro. That's cold-blooded, God. It's interesting because in reading chapter 2, disclaimer for myself, I myself have never been incarcerated, but I do know about that amendment in the Constitution. And, I've heard how people saying how they have to keep their sanity, but I could only imagine. But reading what Kwame said, like, you can just picture yourself, man, just the walls closing in, being locked up for 20, 21 hours a day. There's only 24 hours in a day. Like, that has just got to be so debilitating in terms of mental health. And it's funny because imperialistic regimes, they always paint prison as a place of reform. You did the crime, do your time, go there and have your come to Jesus and reform. But how do you reform in those circumstances? You don't have access to nature. You don't have access to human interaction other than quote unquote like an overseer. Like, how do they expect people to reform? That, it's very oppressive, and it really makes me appreciate what inmates go through. And then, now with for-profit prisons and even businesses that take advantage of inmates and manufacturing products and so forth, the prison industrial complex is just so dirty. And it just really makes me appreciate that. I think he painted that picture well. Anybody else got any other thoughts on the chapter or anything to hit home?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, for a minute, going back to like a rough breakup I had, and like how hard that is, right? Like the first time you get your heart broken is like nothing else.
Yeah, you always remember.
But I can't imagine because for me that helped me like internalize a lot of things and grow from it. But I can't imagine doing that without being able to call a friend on the phone, cry to my mom or whatever, and doing that, knowing that's basically never going to happen, because by the time you're over it, that's, you're not getting out for years after, decades after. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cold. That man, what a cold way to end chapter 2. I was like, oh man, I felt like I just got stabbed right in the heart, because there's something to be said about human interaction, even in times of, you know, um, just achiness, just in times of just a bad situation. Sometimes human touch can do a lot, right? And man, to not be able to do that physically, right? Because obviously you're incarcerated, you're behind glass or whatever, walls or gates or whatever. But then think about it, most prison systems are segregated in terms of gender. And with men, sometimes you can't show that emotion. So even if you wanted to, like, you're almost held to a different level, but yet, he still broke down and cried. I know I would have. That man, that hit me. Two things that really hit me was the heartbreak and really realizing then, and maybe even now, that in my opinion, there's no way to reform people that go through that. If anything, you're actually making them worse. There's no way to reform in an environment, like in a physical environment like that. And then let's not even talk about people that have mental health, behavioral health issues. I know, again, disclaimer, I haven't been incarcerated, but I know that the family members of mine that were incarcerated, they are just now getting vaccinated, where the outside general population was already inoculated. Of course, if you can kind of go back in time, a lot of the people that were first getting the COVID-19 vaccination was rich people, right? Actors, right? Sports stars and so forth. And I remember for myself thinking, oh, do I want to get that? Like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but the government's pushing it. And I'll never forget, an elder from the American Indian movement told me one time, he goes, Lobo, this isn't like blankets of smallpox. Who is getting the vaccine? If it's not 99%, you want it because they have it. And when he said that, I was like, oh, that hit me cold, like a left hook. I was like, yeah, it is the rich and the elite that are getting it. You're right, I do want it. And then, there was that whole um, movement through, I don't know, the CDC or public health systems to mass inoculate people, and I got it. But I can tell you out of experience that I have a nephew locked up in Oklahoma. He's just now getting dose number 1. And we're talking, what, 2-3 years in? So, medically speaking, they already are at risk. You throw some mental health in there, and yeah, even just for quote unquote sane ambulatory people, I can now see how it's hard to keep your sanity. I can now see that. Yeah.
So let's see. Letty has a hand.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Letty.
Hey, so one, this chapter really moved me. Damn, Peaches, damn you, one. But two, you could think too, the prison system, like you said, it's for profit now, you know, especially back in the day. If you really look at any type of prison system that's ever been established, they're made to dehumanize you, you know, they bring you to a point where you don't feel, and this is, my brother's been in and out of prison since he was legal, since he was 18, 19. And, you know, it just, even hearing from him and hearing, you know, the book at the same time, it relates because it does. My brother's told me so many times, God, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know what to do with life. I don't know, you know, he doesn't know who he is anymore. They lose, you know, you lose yourself in there. And it's almost like I told him, you know, he's out on paper right now, but he's completing his program. And it's a challenge for him because those types of programs are made to let you fail and lead you to continue to fail, especially if you're an addict or a creature of habit, where they get the habitual and they keep letting you out and letting you out and letting you out on these paperwork things. And then on top of that, you come back in and, oh, well, you know, Your Honor, I was high. This is why I did it. I was feeding my habit. Okay, cool. Well, let's get 10 more years out of you. Let's get some cheap labor out of you. And it almost, you know, reminds me of the movie Life in a certain part when he, you know, they figured out, well, you know, what does it matter? Mississippi got 10, 40 years of cheap labor out of them, you know, and it sucks because for those people not profiting for the prison system, or those people who don't know anybody in the prison system or been involved in the prison system or have anything to do with that, they're just, oh, well, they did the crime, you know, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Okay, but they're still human. These are still people with mental issues. These are still people with emotional issues, with physical issues, with every single thing they have going on. Like you said in the other chapter we read last week, and when we began in chapter 1, you know, you think about those people that you let down. You know, I've never been to prison, but I've been incarcerated, I've been to jail, and I thought immediately about my mom. The first person I let down was my mom. The second, you know, was my children. How could I do this to them? How could I make these certain types of choices? You know, and then you start reflecting on yourself, because all you have to do is time to think. And then you start picking yourself apart. And then either you can do that in a good way, like you did, and you can start learning and teaching yourself and figuring out, wait a minute, what happened? Or you spiral and then you have no way to come back. And the only thing that you know is, okay, I get out, I'm cool for a little bit. Wait, hold on, this is too much. If I go do this, I can go back. And there's your structure. And it sucks because, unfortunately, for a lot of minorities, this is the life that they've been led into, because these certain types of environment have been set geographically in certain types of places. You know, that's why drugs are rampant. This type of drug is so rampant in this place. This type of drug is so rampant in this place. These viruses are rampant here. It's all a geographical thing. And unfortunately, it affects, you know, us, I guess I could say, more than anybody else, because we are brought up. I wasn't brought up in a suburb. You know, I was brought up in a little rural country town. I was going crazy mentally. I came out and I was like, ooh, time to wild out. You know, I don't know what to do. Oh, I would go out, you know, I'd probably worried my mom on end being out and crazy for 2 weeks at a time. But it's just, you don't know what else to do. And when you have that habit, you just continue to go back. And that's what they rely on, because that's where that money comes from. And it sucks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Like that's a good observation. What were you gonna say, Nick?
Well, so I'm here in Philly, right? Which Philly is where the first penitentiary in the whole world was built, right? It's still standing. It's a museum. It's actually I mean, for someone who's not done more than a few days at a time, it's a very cool place to visit.
Interesting.
Eastern State Penitentiary. It was in use until like 1970 something. And the whole idea of the penitentiary is penitence, right? It is to go there, remove yourself from the society that poisoned you, get closer to God, and then come out. And supposedly you're a healed person, or more of a healed person. And that's the thing that I think of, is that I don't care who you ask, we all know that that's not what's happening. That's in our lives. I don't care how old you are. That's never been happening. Right. And so then it goes back to the question of like, why are there still prisons? And I love that, Kwame, that you put the quote from the 13th Amendment in there, because that's key, right? You free all these enslaved people, and then you have to figure out what to do with them. You had all this free labor, so then they have the convict leasing system where they lease the imprisoned people straight back to the same fucking plantations that they were on before. And this was not just in the interest of the plantation owners, this is the interest of the entire white working class, right? Because you now have all of these people who now can take a job way cheaper than any of you, right? So this I'm looking at this like, this is a further way of just dividing our class, right? And at that point in time, I don't think people were looking at this necessarily as a class issue, but it is a class issue, right? Obviously, it's much more complex than just being about class, but that's, in my studying, that's been one of the most obvious ways of separating the class, is by having cheaper labor, right? Yeah. Adios, comrade. Kwame signing off.
Power to the people. I enjoyed this, comrades.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Kwame.
Be safe.
You too.
But yeah, it's like, so, in the Poor People's Army, something we do often is reality tours, because we're in Kensington, Philadelphia, which is the center of the opioid epidemic in this country. You can buy any drug on, just walk 3 blocks and people just shouting perks, dope, hard, whatever you want. And so we do these reality tours, right, to show people a different part of America, a different kind of poverty that most people don't see. Even people who grow up in poor neighborhoods don't see this kind of poverty in the United States. Someone today even said, I grew up in India and I didn't see this kind of poverty. And so the point I'm making is that we were talking on a reality tour today, right? About an elder that we had made a mural of, and the city covered up right after we made a mural on one of our members' homes, right? We had planned a big march from DC to New York, and stopping in Philly, middle of the night, they went and painted over the whole mural. And it was a labor leader that we were trying to that we had painted a mural of. And he was an important person because he, as a labor leader who had led so many strikes, had seen all the scabs come in to replace them. And those were unemployed people, right? And so what he was doing was figuring out, how do we leak the unions, the organized workers with the organized poor, who are non-union workers, the unemployed? How do we unify all of us so we can fight together? So when we strike at our plant, in North Philly, they can't just go down the street and find more people, because those people are in solidarity with us and like, nah, we're not scabbing, and throughout history, that's been very racialized. They've like brought in people of different races to do that work, right? I mean, non-white people. But I don't know, I just think that's really important to look at, is like, how do we build that solidarity inside and outside of prisons? And people who are in both, it's kind of hard to have an action together, right? When you're in prison, and having some sort of direct action is putting yourself on the line in a way that's probably not always that smart. But we need to figure that out, as we build a broad movement across identity lines and through all these different types of organizations working on, housing or racial justice or, addiction or recovery, whatever, folks are working on the outside, connecting that with the folks on the inside, and learning from their experience and having them learn from what we're doing and really thinking together and building together, because that's the only way we end the prison system. Ultimately we got to overthrow capitalism to end incarceration, but for real, if we want to start, we got to start building that kind of solidarity,
Right. It's almost like the whole prison system, whether it's a state run or if it's a for-profit prison, like it's a bastard byproduct of capitalism. Like it's so dirty. I remember my wife, she's like borderline vegan, vegetarian. And I remember there was something I needed to order. It was like a holster or a dog collar or something. And I wanted like a leather product, right? And she was like, no. Cactus products, they feel like leather and you have the same durability and whatever. And so she was looking on Etsy, which is, a website you can buy artisan goods from the people, by the people, right? She was looking at something and she goes, I think this is actually either an inmate or a prison that's kind of fronting like they're a small business. And I don't remember how she found out. She's like a cyber sleuth, and come to find out it was true. Like there were prisoners over in Eastern Oregon State Penitentiary here in Oregon State, where I'm at. I'm sorry, Coffee Creek in Wilsonville, south of us.
I've been there. I toured that.
Yeah,
place.
yeah. So a lot of those inmates there, especially like a lot of the indigenous ones that like do like hand tooling or like leather stuff, those are their wares, right? And it's just so funny that some of those same individuals are literally marginalized and exploited to make leather goods for like Oregon State Police, like the saddles for like the horse cops. Like they make them and they make them at cost, and the inmates get nothing. And what's interesting about that is like if Nick or Letty and I formed a business, right? Whether our workers are unionized or not, by law, and I don't remember if it's like a bully law or an OSHA law, you have to pay minimum wage, right? Which is whatever it is per hour. But they don't have to do that to the inmates. They literally can like exploit and marginalize them. And once again, it's like capitalism just rearing its ugly head, so much so that I'm now conscious of the products that we buy for the use in our home, because consciously, if it came from an inmate's hands, I can't do it. Like you don't know what this poor guy or woman's condition was like. They're not getting a cut of it.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think even my missus told me that Procter and Gamble, like one of the largest like soap making companies, also does like prison labor. Like it's just
Starbucks does.
Starbucks. That's right. I just heard
Those
about
those
that.
like the covers that around
The sleeves. Yeah,
the sleeves.
that's right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about Starbucks is you have that dirty little secret about them, but man, they are union busters. There's a big movement here in Oregon and in Washington on unionizing the Starbucks. And every time it starts up, they either get shut down, as the whole Starbucks like business will get shut down, relocated, or the employees get transferred. Like that's a dirty company. That is so dirty.
Well, and just back to the prison labor, like you and I were talking about Portland Community College, right?
Yeah.
While I was there, I did an internship in the Oregon State Legislature, in the House of Representatives. And one day, the representative I was working with was like, "Hey, you want to go to the prison? We're going to tour prison." I was like, "All right, cool." And it was a special tour. It was a tour with senators and representatives. So they were trying to show them the great stuff they were doing, right? And so we went into the wood shop, the metal shop, and it's teaching people how to work with wood and teaching people how to weld and different things, and not very many people, just a few people. And then the thing that we're like really excited to show us was people that were learning how to make eyeglasses, right? And then with some distance from that and a different perspective, I now realize you weren't trying to teach people how to work with wood, and you weren't trying to teach people how to weld and how to make glasses. You were trying to get free labor and exploit people under the guise of giving them education. That's what they're doing. People don't get out of prison and go, I'm getting into the eyeglass industry, I'm going to go become an eyeglass manufacturer. No, that's
right.
How many people have you ever met in that industry? Probably none, because it's a tiny industry, because like most jobs, it's automated. And yeah, I think that's, I don't know, it was just kind of interesting how they try to frame it as, a workforce development thing, when it's really just, exploitation of people who don't want to sit in a cell. And it's like, yeah, why would you not want to learn that? But in order to even get to be the person who is working in that wood shop, those like two people that are working alongside the staff, you had to jump through all these hoops, right, to ever get there, which resembles society. I mean, people in positions of leadership in city government, state, whatever, nonprofits, whatever, leadership at universities, those are the same people who jump through all these hoops, check all these marks, don't piss off the wrong people, say yes sir, yes ma'am to the right people, and are just brown nosers who are, that's how they get there. And through that process, they're rubbing shoulders with certain kinds of people that view the world in certain kinds of way, and they then become those kind of people. It's a social reproduction, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, that's so dirty, man, to paint something like under the guise of, oh, we're teaching a trade, and no, you're really just exploiting people. It just, that to me is like one of the lowest things you can do to a person is exploit them. They already are vulnerable. Like you said, penitence, like to do penance, like they're already are at their low point. They're trying to keep saying, and that whole guise of here, come do this, take your time off. Well, of course they're going to do it. They don't want to sit. I wouldn't want to sit in a 4x6 concrete room. Of course I'm going to go do it, but there's no equal pay. They don't even get benefits. They don't even get minimum wage. Like they get cents on the dollar. It's just so crazy. It's almost like America's version of sweatshops, like a legalized form of indentured servitude sweatshop. Like that's what it seems like to me. It's crazy to think how many like textiles, how many goods, how many American made product, quote unquote, made in America are coming off of an inmate's hands. And it's just, yeah, I can't do it. It really makes you think like you're right, Nick, like, of course, capitalism is the mother of all evils, but there's so many siblings off of capitalism that we can attack too, like the whole prison system, not just the for-profits, the whole prison system. Like, me mentioning my nephew, that's a state sanctioned prison he's at. So it's not necessarily a for-profit, but you would think state. So, it's a state agency. They're governed by state elected officials. Most state agencies have a health department. So it just blew my mind that whatever state health department never thought to push vaccinations on inmates who cannot sometimes have 6 feet of distance or whatever. They're just now getting that. Like that still blows my mind. But then again, when you're the vulnerable and you're the oppressor of the oppressed, you're kind of low man on the totem pole, so to speak. And so they were just an afterthought. I almost think the only reason why they got inoculated is so that they could man those production lines. I think if it wasn't for that, they probably never would have. It sucks to say that, but as disheartening as it seems, I almost wonder that. I forget what textiles they produce out of that prison, but if you don't have your worker bees breaking their backs for you, you're not making that income,
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, there was a judge like 5 years ago or something that had ownership in a prison. And he was also sending kids to that prison, or it was juvie, but same thing. And it's making money, and I think that's the whole logic, right? Of all of capitalism is more, 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 more. But I think that the whole like not buying things from prison labor is like important, but at the same time we got to understand that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Period. Everything that you consume is based on someone's exploited labor and the exploitation of resources from this mother earth that we have that is completely finite. So I think there's a lot of rhetoric, specifically in progressive circles, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, actually, around consumption and what's good and bad consumption. And that rhetoric exists to put the onus on us, right? Like, you need to be choosing better to be a better consumer, so you can save this planet or not exploit people in a third world country. And it's like, oh, so I can exploit someone here? Like, is that better? Maybe it's actually better to bring the money over somewhere else, but I think that rhetoric really can be disserving, and I don't think that's what you were saying at all. But I just noticed that they try to do it. They try to make us feel responsible for production.
Right.
Like, until we own the means of production, we're not responsible for shit.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's interesting. If there was ever anything that could come out of like a federal correctional prison like experience, I remember my mouth dropped when I read something by one of the Bundy brothers. I don't remember if it was Ammon or Ted, or the Bundy brothers are some very ultra right-wing fascists. It's a group of family that originated in Nevada. They went into the Malheur National Forest here in Oregon with arms, fully armed, kicked out some state park rangers, and then they occupied the land. And they were claiming that the Bureau of Land Management was taking away their cattle rights, this and that. And I forgot what happened in Portland, but one of them was indicted on a federal charge and did a few years, I think maybe 2 or 3. I mean, it was a small amount of time for what he probably should have gotten. But I'll never forget getting some intel that he was going to make a speech at a BLM event in Boise. And Boise from Portland is not that far away. And I remember thinking, oh, hell no, like, you got to be out of your mind. Like, what gives you the gall? And then I read something that he said, and I never in a million years of my existence thought that I would ever agree with something on that far right side of fascist beliefs, but it kind of hit home a little bit. He said, now that I have been incarcerated, I saw, in his own words, the blacks, the whites, the Mexicans all segregated. And he goes, and it wasn't until I was talking to a couple of Mexicans that they knew cattle rousting. They, worked on the lands or whatever. I talked to a couple of the black people, and some of them were from the South, and we had a lot in commonality. And so he was understanding in his own little fascist head intersectionality. And he didn't like that. He didn't like how everybody was being segregated in prison. And I thought, my God, if somebody on that far right side could see that, imagine if the average working class person, or I'll even flip it, somebody who maybe is Chicano or Latina or Latinx or whatever, who has now become that 99%, they lose their ethnic origin and they're now part of the problem. They're now the capitalistic pig. They're now that 99%. How could we get that same prison experience to see intersectionality to the eyes of the average person and then also to the eyes of those 99 percenters? Would it make a difference? I never thought it would in his, in his point of view and in my opinion, but obviously it did. And I don't even remember whatever happened if you went to that speech or whatever, but I know it was hot as fire all over social media. And I thought, wow, if he had his quote unquote come to Jesus moment in prison, what is it going to take to bring that to the masses? That it literally is the class struggle, right? It sucks to say, but I think aside from prison systems giving you an inmate number and you understanding that you're incarcerated from some dude from, you know, backwoods Virginia, and you guys are incarcerated on the same thing, you're going to do the same amount of time, and it sucks. I think the only other people that can understand that are maybe working class people that have the struggle, that understand that through intersectionality, we're pretty much all one. It's that 99%, that capitalistic regime that just controls everything. Like you said, finite earthly resources, for-profit prison system, even state controlled. I mean, we all know politicians are in their back pockets. Like,
Yeah.
just awakening the masses to understand that. I think that's the most revolutionary thing we can do. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why they took out Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. He was bringing together the Young Patriots. Are you kidding me? He was bringing together all kinds of people. And I think that was such a threat to the establishment and the state that they were like, no, man, we got to take him out. And they did, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, the Poor People's Army, our name's also the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, which is based on MLK's vision of 4 months before he was assassinated, he started the Poor People's Campaign. I think that's all, ironically was killed 4 months later, when he was calling on making a tent city in DC on the mall.
Interesting.
But, something we always say is we're not the left, we're not the right, we're the bottom coming for the top. Because I think that this left-right debate that's happening in pretty much all spheres across this country was crafted by media, right? And over 90% of media in this country is owned by 6 corporations. And the way I look at things is that we're living through the largest shift humans have ever lived through as a result of automation, because it's labor replacing technology. The robotic arm and the microprocessor chip have the ability to produce without humans, right? Which is the first time the ruling class has ever been able to produce things without our labor, right? And so we're, as a whole, as a class, we're not exploitable, so we're expendable. And I think the rise of Trump is as a result of this growing equality of misery among the entire class, and is creating an entirely new class that's useless to the ruling class, that is permanently unemployed and underemployed, not exploitable, and people are starting to wake up to that, because there's nothing to catch you when you fall. There's not another job that you can go get. So they've told us, go to college, go get a degree. And now people are starting to wake up to that. Like, oh, wait, yeah, that's all sham too. There ain't jobs out here that are going to pay back my debt and make it worth it. And so the way that they can continue to put a wedge between us as a class is through one, identity politics, and two, through this left-right debate. And some people, leftists, love to say, I'm not in the left-right paradigm of Republicans and Democrats, but calling yourself left in the first place is participating in the dialogue that the ruling class created to separate our class. And, you know, I think that you have all of these white people, specifically poor white people, who aren't getting their needs or dreams met. And what has unified us as a country, and specifically white people, is the idea of the American dream, right? If you work hard enough, you'll get there, you'll get somewhere, you'll at least be able to, you know, buy your own house, right? And so that myth is what's unifying people. And then it's not happening. So they go, oh, we got to blame somebody. And then you have this guy, Trump, that comes in and goes, hey, it's the Mexican immigrants. They're the problem. Hey, see them, those people over there, those stupid liberals are yelling Black Lives Matter. They don't care about you. They don't care about your life. They only care about Black people, right? And so they can just continue to put this wedge between us through this binary debate that is just complete bullshit and was fabricated. And we have to find a way to get past that. And, you know, we have to figure out how to connect with some of these people who are fucking backwards, like the Bundys. Hey, the Bundys and I have a lot in common. I'm in Philly taking over abandoned properties to house homeless people. It's not to, you know, raise cattle, but it's still saying, hey, government's got property. I'm not benefiting from it. People should be benefiting from this. So I'm going to go take it. That's in common. If we can link up and we can figure out how to agree on some stuff, you know, that's how we can win. If we just keep saying, like, you all on the right, you're over there are so problematic, you voted for Trump, or you know, you're problematic because you said this or that thing, or have this or that belief. And it's like, no, we're in a time where we don't got fucking time. We don't have time to let them continue to divide our class, because they don't need us anymore. And so they can just let us all die. Literally. You can go throughout every major city in this country and see that there's a growing homeless problem and more empty apartments, right? In Philly, there's 10-to-1 abandoned properties to every homeless person. And that doesn't include brand new empty apartments that haven't been rented out yet.
Crazy.
Go to Chicago, it's 27-to-1. You go to Detroit and it's 53-to-1. Right. So it's just the contradictions are everywhere, but we have to figure out how to bridge that gap as individual people, but even more importantly, as movement, as like, we got to figure out what political motion out here will do that and allow us to unify with each other so we can have common goals of overthrowing the ruling class and allowing all of this automated production to actually benefit us. Because that sounds dope. We got robots that'll produce for us. We don't got to do the labor ourselves. Fuck yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. But I want it to benefit us, not, you know, Jeff Bezos and the Koch brothers.
Right. Good point. Those are very valid, realistic, good points. This has been great, y'all. We're at time. Sister Anna, Magnificently Black, thank you for being here. Brother Joe, Brown Beret, Lefty, Northern Nevada Brown Berets, thank you guys for being here. Nick, this couldn't be possible without your help. So shout out to Nick from the Poor People's Army. Thank you guys for being here. And and having these conversations, because there's more to come in this book. Like almost everything I read about in the book, I was like relaying it to real life things that are happening now, even though, Brother Kwame was incarcerated years ago. And this is basically his autobiography of how he came to be who he is now. It's interesting that some things just don't change, but that's why we're here doing the things that we do, right? So with that, I think what we should do is we should count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shout out, all power to the people, and then we'll stop the recording there, Nick. All right. So on 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All power to the people. Awesome. All right, you guys.
See
Well,
y'all.
thank you, Nick.
I'll post this on YouTube and y'all get the link.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, until next Monday, you guys have a blessed week, and let's keep it trucking.
Peace.